Hi everyone and welcome to Shaluso, and today we have something really special. We have the first appearance of a Holy Trinity watch review on the channel. I'd like to give a shout out to Zager Watches in Sydney, Australia for making this happen. They kindly lent me one of their watches to review and they have a great selection, so do make sure you check out their links in the description below. And today we are looking at the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore Chronograph with the Panda variant.
You hear a lot about the Holy Trinity, specifically the Royal Oak, the Overseas, and the Nautilus. But none of it really does justice until you actually lay eyes on one of these. The Royal Oak Offshore was released in 1993 as a reinterpretation of Gerald Genta's 1972 classic, the Royal Oak. And what it did is it modernized the Royal Oak design, but without losing any of the charm that the original had. It still features the classic hobnail design, but this time chunkier and thicker to reflect the design and proportions of the watch. The bracelet is still integrated and has been perfectly adjusted to the sizing of the new 42mm case. And the thickness, which is bumped up to 14.3mm thanks to the Dupois Depraz chronograph module mounted on top of the Calibre 3126/3840, is still reasonable when you consider that it is a modular chronograph versus an integrated. On the dial side, the first thing you notice is, of course, that octagonal bezel with steel screws as opposed to the white gold ones used in the standard Royal Oak. But the highlight of this particular model has to be the Panda dial. Black, slightly sunken sub-registers with silver rings around them, and a little flourish of red just to give it that racing feel. Appropriate for a company that once had Michael Schumacher as one of its brand ambassadors. And those registers are laid out in a 12/6/9 so you can have plenty of space for the beautiful applied AP logo in white gold at the 3 o'clock, right next to the Cyclops, which is inverted so you can see the date clearly but without having to mar the lines of the flat sapphire glass. And then even just looking at it, you get more depth as you see the slightly sloped ray hot, which is almost a silvery texture in some lights, showing the tachymeter, again another nod to its racing styling. Despite what you may think from looking at images of it, it actually wears a lot smaller on the wrist than what its measurements suggest. At 14.3mm, it's not exactly an altiplano, but it doesn't feel top heavy either. And a lot of that is down to this silky steel bracelet, which culminates in a double deployant clasp secured by a clamshell. It does require a lot of force to open, however you're rewarded by these beautifully machined swing arms and ceramic pin snaps to maintain tolerances. And this all allows for it to feel secure on the wrist, almost too secure with how much force you have to apply to actually open it up. But you're further rewarded by the fact that the clasp is actually curved inwards to follow the shape of your wrist, and that's one reason why it's so comfortable. That and the fact that the bracelet links are so perfectly sized that it just articulates with no effort whatsoever. On the inside of this 100-meter water-resistant case, we have the Audemars Piguet manufacturer Calibre 3126/3840 with a Dupois Depraz automatic chronograph vertical clutch module on top, indicating the hours, minutes, and seconds on that Panda dial. The actuation is extremely precise, requiring nearly no effort, and the winding, both when unscrewing the crown, when winding the watch, and then when screwing it back in, all feels so smooth and precise. And the crown's shape, which mimics of course the octagonal shape of the bezel, makes it really easy to grip, and it's coated in rubber just like the pushers, again to make them easy to grip and actuate. Once the details start on this watch, you never really stop seeing them. It starts of course with the red flourishes and then seeing those nice big chunky Arabic numerals, but then you discover they're actually loomed, albeit weakly. And then you have the nice sloped ray hot giving that dial depth. And then you start to realize things like the fact that while yes, the hobnail pattern is chunkier, it actually allows for a lot more space on the dial. This is a full chronograph with a date, a cyclops, and a big logo on it, and none of it feels crowded. And then when you look closer at the dials, you notice the different styles between them. There's more red on the running seconds versus the others, whereas it's the opposite on the minutes register, which is mostly sort of silvery white with just the red on the hand. And then as you back away from the crosshair style hours register, you start to realize that all of the satin finish on the bezel is perfectly vertical. And this is something you start to notice as you explore the rest of the watch, is the level of detail on the finish. There's a polished hairline bevel all across the shoulder of the bracelet, And that's the only real polished surface that you notice on this particular example, because unlike the normal Royal Oak, which has polish on the inside of the links, this one is fully satin finished. And then there's the case back, which has a circular satin grain flanked around by the iconic screws, which are reflective of the front. And then you have that extremely 90s style offshore written right under the 70s text of the Royal Oak. Or how about that slightly exposed gasket in between the case and the bezel, just to add a little bit more layering to this complex case. Whichever angle you look at it, the Royal Oak Offshore exudes style, almost more so than its original 70s counterpart. And that's the thing about these Holy Trinity watches. They have so many details and design flourishes combined with amazing movements on the inside that they elevate the level to which you can appreciate watches like this.
So that's my thoughts on the Royal Oak Offshore Chronograph. And first and foremost, I cannot stress enough what it is like when you first experience a watch like this for an extended amount of time. I've handled quite a few nice watches from Rolexes, IWCs, and Omegas since starting this channel, but nothing compares to the feeling it is when you hold a Holy Trinity watch. The amount of detail on it, all of it, the whole thing just comes together and you understand why these watches are held in such high regard. It's not just what you see on a picture, it's the whole experience, the winding, seeing the different finishes, all of it. I could go on forever. So needless to say, it was a great first impression and I can't wait to look into more Holy Trinity watches and just continue this watch journey. But let's focus on the task at hand, and that is of course starting out with the 3 positives and negatives for the Royal Oak Offshore Chronograph. Now the first thing I want to highlight about this watch right from the beginning is of course the attention to detail. This is on another level when you compare it to something like a Rolex. Every single facet, every single choice between polished or satin, it's all made with the conscious idea of making it special. And that iconic look from the bezel design with the bolts inset, it all just adds up to make something truly amazing. Probably my favorite highlight is the bracelet though. Just that nice beautiful bevel along the shoulder line, just having that in polish, it just gives it that little bit of pop for what is otherwise a very discreet offshore. And I say that with a grain of salt because of course this is still a big chunky watch, but it all just works. The second thing I want to highlight is the actual movement, specifically just the feel of it. The motion when you unscrew the crown and start winding it, it all just feels so precise. It feels like the definition of precision. When you push in one of the pushers, it goes in just enough. Not too much that you feel you really need to hammer it in there or force it in there, but not so little that it's unresponsive and it doesn't feel like a cheap click. It's just enough. It's difficult to put it into words. It is something that you need to try out and feel, but trust me when I say the feel of when you interact with this watch is like no other watch that I've tried. And then the third highlight is the fact that this watch, it shrugs off its chunkiness. When you look at figures, when you look at measurements, it makes you think that, oh, this watch is going to be enormous. When you look at pictures, it does. But when you put it on your wrist, it seems to shrug it all off and it just sort of sits nicely. It's extremely comfortable. The bracelet allows a lot of movement, so it doesn't feel like you have this big bulky watch on your wrist. It feels like a normal watch at the end of the day. So definitely just the feel and comfort and the way it shrugs off its size, and also the way it wears. It wears a lot smaller than it actually is in terms of when you look at it, you think it's going to be really tall, but it doesn't feel top heavy. Now, I could probably go on forever rabbiting on about the positives about this, but we do need to recognize that no watch is perfect. So here are my 3 negatives about the Offshore Chronograph. The first one is that despite the fact that it does shrug off its size, its design does limit its versatility. Whereas something like a standard Royal Oak, you can still get away with wearing it with a suit. This one just looks ridiculous on a suit cuff. Unless you're really going for that power image and, you know, really shirking off any sort of decorum, then it might work, but for the most part this is strictly a watch for casual, business casual at best. It's not something that you're going to be wearing to a black tie function anytime soon. The second thing is that despite the fact that the clasp is extremely robust and extremely confidence inspiring, to a degree it's almost too confidence inspiring. And what I mean by that is that it's extremely clunky to take it off. You have to apply a lot of pressure, and for a watch of this price point, it's not something where you want to find yourself in a situation where you have to apply a lot of pressure in any regard. Definitely that's something where I feel they could have made the opening action a little bit smoother, But that being said, you know it's not going to fall off by accident. And the third disadvantage is that if you do have a smaller wrist, then you may run into the complication of the fact that it does still flare. This is something that happens with most integrated bracelets, and in that they have a little bit of extra flare that makes it wear a little bit bigger in terms of the actual surface of your wrist. So if you have a flat wrist, you're probably okay, but if you have a really circular wrist, you might find yourself with a little bit too much space on the sides, and you'll have to adjust your bracelet and it'll look a little bit weird on you. But overall though, this watch definitely delivered on its promise. It definitely delivered as the type of watch that you would want to have. It definitely delivered on the hype of being part of the Holy Trinity. And especially because it was one that I kind of maybe had a little bit of resistance to, because I thought it might be a bit too big and too chunky. But holding it, wearing it, testing it out, you could really tell that this is something truly special. But of course, all that hype and perfection, it does come at a price. And this is Audemars Piguet, so that price isn't going to be cheap, but rest assured, in my opinion at least, it is actually worth it, having actually tried it out and spent some time with it. But let's get the elephant out of the room out of the way. This particular model isn't actually currently in production, but for reference, current offshore chronograph models in stainless steel run around $30,000 US. This particular model is currently trading on Chrono24 anywhere from around $15,000 to $17,000 US. Of course, depending on condition, depending on if you can get it on the bracelet or whether it's on the alligator or leather strap option. So there is a little bit of price variance and a little bit of price drop compared to the original retail price of current offshores. But if you put it into perspective, something like a Daytona, for example, which is going to be a lot more common, not have as much hand finishing, that would run you around $13,000 US if you were talking new, and you're already into the 20s if you're talking pre-owned. So you put that into perspective, then suddenly the Royal Oak Offshore Chrono does make a lot of sense. And you're getting something that has all the hand finishing. It still has a manufacture movement by one of the most prestigious brands in watchmaking. It's still something that is quite versatile and that has a lot of presence. It has so much attention to detail. You could sit and watch it. You could put it on a stand and have it just as a piece of art just to look at. There's so much going on for it. I think at least it does merit its value. But let me know in the comments below what you think. Let me know what you think of the Royal Oak Offshore in general. And just for fun, let me know what sort of variants you'd want to see of the offshore chronograph in the future. The Panda dial obviously is a classic, but we know that Audemars Piguet loves releasing different variants on it, so I'd love to see what you think about different Royal Oaks. And of course, if you are interested in this particular watch, then make sure you check out Zager watches. Their link's in the description below. And of course, if you like the video, please do like it and share it. And if you want to see new watch content every week, make sure that you subscribe to Shaluso so that you can get the newest and best watch reviews coming out to you. And of course, last but not least, thanks for watching this video, and we'll catch you on the next one.